The heart monitor's steady beeping suddenly stops. In the sterile white hospital room, 72-year-old business mogul Charles Barrington lies motionless on the bed, his weathered face pale against the crisp pillows. But then, something impossible happens. His eyes flutter open for just a split second, scanning the room with startling clarity before closing again. The one person who witnesses this moment, Sarah Whitaker, the 60-year-old black maid who's been cleaning his mansion for the past 15 years. But what happened next shocked everyone. 3 hours earlier, Sarah moves methodically through the marble hallways of the Barrington estate, her practiced hands dusting the priceless artifacts that line the walls. The Georgian mansion sprawls across 12,000 square feet, every inch screaming old money and power. Crystal chandelier is cast dancing shadows as Sarah works, her movements careful and deliberate around the antique furniture. That costs more than most people's houses. Mrs. Sarah, have you heard anything from the hospital today? Asks Maria, the younger housekeeper, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing new, sweetheart, Sarah replies, adjusting a fresh arrangement of white lilies on the mahogany dining table. Mr. Charles has been in that coma for 3 weeks now. Doctors say there's not much hope. Little did Sarah know that her world was about to be turned completely upside down. The phone rings, its shrill tone echoing through the empty mansion. Sarah wipes her hands on her apron and answers with practiced professionalism. Barrington residence. This is Dr. Mitchell from Presbyterian Hospital. The family has requested that all household staff visit today. Mr. Barrington's condition may be deteriorating. At Presbyterian Hospital, the intensive care unit buzzes with tension. Charles Barrington lies connected to a maze of machines, their rhythmic beeping creating an eerie soundtrack. His family hovers nearby, but their whispered conversations aren't about his recovery. They're about his assets. Jeffrey, we need to discuss the will, hisses his sister-in-law, Patricia, her diamond rings catching the harsh fluorescent light. The lawyers called again this morning. Charles's younger brother, Jeffrey, a portly man with thinning hair and expensive suits, leans closer. Patricia, keep your voice down. The staff might hear. What staff? You mean the maid? Patricia's voice drips with condescension. She's nobody, just hired help. This decision would change everything. Sarah enters the room quietly, carrying fresh flowers from the estate's garden. She's witnessed this family's dynamics for years. The cold calculations, the barely concealed resentment, the way they treat Charles's fortune like it's already theirs. But she's also seen Charles's lonely moments, the way he'd sit by his library window, staring out at the gardens with such profound sadness. As she arranges the flowers on the bedside table, Sarah notices something the family has missed entirely. There's a disconnected wire trailing from the heart monitor, not completely detached, but loose enough to create intermittent readings. The machine shows a flat line, but Charles's chest rises and falls with steady, natural breathing. How much longer do the doctors think? Jeffrey asks Dr. Mitchell, who's reviewing the charts. Given the brain activity we're seeing, or rather, not seeing, I'd estimate days, perhaps weeks at most, the doctor responds gravely. But the real shock was still coming. As the family continues their hushed financial discussions, Sarah moves closer to Charles's bedside to adjust his pillow. That's when it happens. His eyes open suddenly, just for a moment, and they lock directly with hers. There's no confusion, no cloudiness that you'd expect from someone in a coma. His gaze is sharp, alert, and filled with something that looks remarkably like recognition. Sarah's heart pounds as she glances around the room. Nobody else has noticed. The family is too absorbed in their inheritance calculations, and the medical staff is busy with charts and medications. But Sarah knows what she saw, and the implications make her hands tremble. Charles's eyes flutter closed again, but not before she catches something else. A barely perceptible shake of his head, so subtle it could have been imagined. But Sarah has spent years reading the subtle communications of her employers, understanding the things they don't say out loud. Doctor, is it normal for the heart monitor to show such irregular readings? Sarah asks quietly, pointing to the machine. Dr. Mitchell glances over, frowning at the display. That's odd. Tech support checked all the equipment yesterday. He begins examining the connections. his brow furrowed with concern. As Sarah watches the doctor work, she notices Charles's breathing pattern change ever so slightly when certain family members speak. It's almost as if he's listening, processing, reacting to their conversations about dividing his empire. The afternoon sun streams through the hospital window, creating long shadows across Charles's still form. But Sarah can't shake the image of those eyes, alert, aware, and somehow pleading. She's worked for wealthy families long enough to recognize when something isn't right, and every instinct she possesses is screaming that Charles Barrington is very much conscious. As visiting hours end, and the family reluctantly prepares to leave, Sarah lingers by Charles's bedside. In the growing twilight, she leans closer and whispers, "Mr. Charles, if you can hear me, I know you're in there." For just a moment, she swears she sees the faintest flicker behind his closed eyelids. The hospital corridors felt different in the early morning light. As Sarah hurried toward the intensive care unit, her heart pounding with the memory of what she'd witnessed, the flicker in Charles Barrington's eyes haunted her thoughts. Was it real? Or had exhaustion played tricks on her mind? She found Dr. Emily Walters reviewing charts near the nurse's station, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun. Sarah had worked for the Barrington family long enough to know which medical professionals could be trusted, and Dr. Walters had always treated her with respect. "Dr. Walters, may I speak with you privately?" Sarah approached carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor looked up, noting Sarah's anxious expression. "Of course. Let's step into the consultation room." Once behind closed doors, Sarah's words tumbled out. "Yesterday evening, when I was with Mr. Barrington, I swear I saw his eyes move. Not just a reflex, real movement, like he was trying to focus on something." Dr. Walters frowned, setting down her clipboard. "Sarah, I understand you're hopeful, but patients in deep comas sometimes exhibit involuntary responses. It doesn't necessarily indicate consciousness." "But what if it does?" Sarah pressed, her voice gaining strength. "What if he's been aware this whole time?" Meanwhile, back at the Barrington mansion, the family lawyer, Robert Sterling, spread documents across Charles's mahogany desk. The opulent study, with its leather-bound books and oil paintings, seemed to mock the chaos unfolding within its walls. Jeffrey Barrington paced behind the desk, his expensive suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. "The new will changes everything," Sterling announced, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Charles made significant modifications just 3 weeks before the accident. The majority of his estate now goes to establishing a foundation for healthcare workers, with Sarah Whitaker named as the primary trustee." Jeffrey's face flushed red. "That's impossible. She's just the help." "Your brother was very specific about his intentions," Sterling continued. "He wanted to honor those who've dedicated their lives to caring for others. But here's what no one knew: these weren't the only documents that mattered." Sarah's growing suspicions were about to uncover something far more disturbing. Back at the hospital, Sarah couldn't shake her unease as she reviewed the visitor logs and treatment schedules. Something felt wrong about the timing of Charles's medications, the way certain staff members avoided making eye contact, the gaps in his medical records that seemed too convenient. Dr. Walters had initially dismissed her concerns, but as Sarah pointed out inconsistencies in the charts, doubt began creeping into the physician's mind. "These dosage changes weren't authorized by me, Dr. Walters murmured, studying the paperwork more closely. "And look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a signature that seemed slightly different from others. "Someone's been altering his treatment schedule." The realization hit them both simultaneously. If someone was manipulating Charles's medical care, it could explain why he remained in such a deep coma, despite his initial prognosis suggesting gradual improvement. As they delved deeper into the files, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Tucked between routine lab reports was a handwritten note that had been hastily erased, but was still partially visible. "Maintain current sedation levels, family authorization." But which family member had given such authorization? And why would they want to keep Charles unconscious? Dr. Walters stared at the evidence, her professional skepticism crumbling. "Sarah, if what we're seeing here is intentional, we're looking at something much more serious than medical negligence. We're looking at deliberate harm." The weight of the discovery settled between them like a heavy stone. Someone in Charles Barrington's inner circle wanted him to remain unconscious, and they'd been systematically ensuring it happened. As Sarah prepared to leave the hospital that evening, she noticed a shadowy figure moving through the medical records office after hours. Her pulse quickened as she recognized the silhouette of someone she'd seen at the mansion, someone with access to both the family and Charles's medical team. The truth was finally within reach, but Sarah realized she might be the only person standing between Charles Barrington and those who wanted him silenced forever. Sarah takes a deep breath outside the hospital room, clutching the altered medical records she'd discovered. The weight of what she's uncovered presses down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. She knows she needs help, but who can she trust? Her phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Henderson Investigations on 5th Street. Come alone. TH." An hour later, Sarah finds herself in a cluttered office above a pawn shop, facing a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes. Tom Henderson gestures to a worn leather chair across from his desk, which is buried under case files and empty coffee cups. "You called in the tip about Charles Barrington's condition," Tom says, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on his wall. "I've been investigating the family for 3 months. Someone's paying me very well to dig up dirt on their business practices." Sarah shifts uncomfortably. "Who hired you?" Tom's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "That's confidential. But I will say this. You're not the only one who thinks something's fishy about Mr. Barrington's coma." Meanwhile, back at the Barrington estate, chaos erupts in the marble-lined living room. Jeffrey Barrington paces furiously while his wife Victoria clutches a glass of wine. With shaking hands, the family lawyer, Mr. Peterson, spreads documents across the mahogany coffee table. "The will is ironclad," Peterson says firmly. "Charles was very specific about his wishes. If he remains incapacitated for more than 6 months, control of Barrington Industries transfers to a charitable foundation." "A charity," Jeffrey explodes. "40 years I've worked beside him, and he leaves everything to strangers." Victoria sets down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "There has to be something we can contest. Charles wasn't in his right mind when he changed the will last month." As Sarah listens to Tom's theories about the Barrington family's financial troubles, her mind drifts to memories of Charles from better times. She remembers watching him through the study window, working late into the night on business deals that would make or break smaller companies. He was ruthless, she admits to Tom. "I've seen him destroy competitors without batting an eye, but I've also seen him cry over old photo albums when he thought no one was watching." Tom leans forward, his eyes sharp with interest. "Tell me about the night he collapsed." "It was strange," Sarah recalls. "He'd been arguing with someone on the phone all evening. Then around midnight, I heard this crash from his study. When I found him, he was unconscious, but his breathing seemed deliberate, almost like he was pretending." "He's not in a real coma, is he?" Tom asks quietly. Sarah's heart pounds. Hearing someone else voice her suspicions makes them feel dangerously real. "I don't think so. But why would he fake it?" The next morning, Sarah returns to the hospital with renewed determination. She finds Dr. Walters reviewing patient charts at the nurse's station, looking exhausted from her overnight shift. "Emily, I need you to look at something," Sarah says, pulling out photocopies of the medical records she discovered. Dr. Walters glances around nervously before leading Sarah to an empty consultation room. She studies the documents with growing concern, her professional demeanor cracking. "These medication dosages are all wrong," she whispers. "Someone's been giving him mild sedatives instead of the prescribed treatment." "Sarah, this could be considered medical fraud. So you believe me now?" Emily closes the file and looks directly at Sarah. "I'm going to run some tests today when the family isn't here. If you're right about this, we need to contact the authorities immediately." But their conversation is interrupted when Sarah notices a familiar figure watching them through the consultation room window. It's Jeffrey Barrington, and his expression is anything but friendly. That evening, Sarah returns to her small apartment above the mansion's garage to find a package waiting by her door. There's no return address, just her name written in block letters across brown paper. Inside, She finds a USB drive and a handwritten note. Everything you need to expose the truth is on here. Charles Barrington isn't the victim. He's the mastermind. Trust no one, especially Tom Henderson. His real employer will shock you. Sarah stares at the USB drive, her hands trembling. Whatever's on this device could change everything she thought she knew about the situation. But as she reaches for her laptop, she realizes someone has been in her apartment. Her belongings are slightly out of place, and there's a faint smell of expensive cologne in the air. The same cologne Jeffrey Barrington always wears. The package arrived at midnight. Sarah's hands trembled as she tore open the manila envelope that had been slipped under the mansion's service entrance. Inside, photographs and documents scattered across her small kitchen table like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized Charles's signature on medical papers she'd never seen before. Advance directive for induced coma, she whispered, reading the header. Patient request for extended unconscious state pending business resolution. The photographs showed Charles meeting with Dr. Morrison, the hospital's chief of staff, just days before his supposed accident. In one image, money clearly exchanged hands. Sarah's mind raced as the implications hit her like a freight train. Charles hadn't fallen into a coma, he'd orchestrated it himself. But why would anyone choose to lie unconscious while their family tore each other apart? The answer came with headlights sweeping across her window. A black sedan pulled into the circular driveway, and Sarah watched as a woman stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the marble. Even in the darkness, Sarah recognized the sharp features and commanding presence she'd seen in family photographs. Marcy Barrington had returned. Sarah quickly gathered the documents, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd worked for this family for 3 years, but she'd never met Charles's daughter. Marcy had cut all ties with her father after some bitter falling out that no one in the household dared mention. The next morning, tension crackled through the breakfast room like electricity before a storm. Jeffrey paced behind the antique dining chairs while Marcy sat perfectly composed, sipping coffee as if she hadn't disappeared for 5 years without a word. "You have some nerve showing up now," Jeffrey snarled, his face flushed with anger and bourbon from the night before. "Where were you when Dad was building this empire? Where were you when he needed family support?" Marcy's green eyes, so similar to her father's, remained ice cold. "I was protecting my integrity, something you wouldn't understand." Sarah entered quietly with fresh coffee, but she couldn't ignore the way Marcy's gaze followed her every movement. There was intelligence there, a calculating awareness that made Sarah's stomach flip. "Jeffrey," Marcy continued, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, "I know about the medical records. I know about the bribes. And I know our father isn't really in a coma." The coffee pot slipped from Sarah's hands, shattering against the Italian marble floor. Jeffrey's face went white as fresh snow. "That's impossible," he stammered. "He's been unconscious for weeks. The doctors confirmed. The doctors confirmed what they were paid to confirm." Marcy stood gracefully, stepping over the broken porcelain. "But some things can't be bought. Some people still have consciences." She looked directly at Sarah, who felt exposed under that penetrating stare. "Isn't that right, Sarah?" Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Walters, "Emergency at hospital. Charles's vitals are spiking. Something's wrong." Jeffrey rushed toward the door, but Marcy's voice stopped him cold. "Don't bother running to the hospital, Uncle Jeffrey. I already know about your little arrangement with Dr. Morrison. I know about the falsified medical reports, the induced coma protocol, and the inheritance clause that kicks in if Dad remains unconscious for 6 months. Sarah's blood turned to ice. 6 months. That was next week. "But here's what you don't know," Marcy continued, pulling out a leather portfolio that made Jeffrey's face drain of all remaining color. "I know why Dad really did this. I know about the federal investigation into Barrington Industries. I know about the insider trading charges that were about to be filed. And I know about the witness who was prepared to testify against him." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Jeffrey's hands shook as he reached for his car keys. "This is insane. You're both insane. Dad is in a medically induced coma because of his accident, and these conspiracy theories are about to be proven true." Marcy's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Because I have something that's going to change everything. Something that proves not only was this planned, but that Dad's been conscious and aware this entire time, just waiting for the right moment to miraculously recover. She opened the portfolio, revealing documents that made Sarah's previous discoveries look like child's play. I have video footage of him communicating with his lawyers through a complex system of eye movements, planned weeks before his supposed accident. But most importantly, Marcy's eyes gleamed with triumph. I have evidence that someone else was supposed to be in that car crash instead of Dad. Someone who would have actually died. The tension in Charles Barrington's hospital room reaches a breaking point as Sarah stands beside his bed, her heart pounding with the weight of everything she's discovered. The evidence Marcy brought forward confirms her worst fears. Charles isn't truly in a coma at all. He's been conscious for weeks, following an unethical medical directive he signed years ago that allows him to fake unconsciousness when facing major legal troubles. Charles, Sarah says firmly, her voice cutting through the sterile silence. I know you can hear me. I know you're awake. The family members gathered around the bed freeze. Jeffrey's face drains of color, while Dr. Walters checks the monitors with growing confusion. The machines show normal brain activity that's been there all along, deliberately ignored by a small circle of corrupt medical staff on Charles's payroll. Sarah reaches into her bag and pulls out the documents she's been gathering for days. I have your real medical records here, Charles. The ones that show you've been conscious this entire time. You've been listening to your family fight over your money while pretending to be dying. Marcy steps forward, her eyes filled with tears. Dad, please, if you're really in there, if Sarah is right, we need to talk. I need to tell you how much I've missed you, how much I regret walking away from our family. The room falls silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. Then, slowly, deliberately, Charles Barrington's eyes flutter open. Not the unconscious movement Sarah glimpsed before, but a full, aware awakening. His gaze moves around the room, taking in each face, his brother Jeffrey's shocked expression, Marcy's tearful relief, Dr. Walter's professional amazement, and finally settling on Sarah. You, he whispers, his voice hoarse from weeks of silence. You figured it out. Jeffrey stumbles backward. Charles, what are you doing? The plan was wrong. Jeffrey, Charles interrupts, slowly sitting up in bed. His movements are weak but determined. I've been lying here for weeks, listening to all of you. Listening to my daughter cry over my bedside. Listening to my family tear itself apart over money I earned by stepping on people's dreams. He looks directly at Sarah, his eyes now clear and focused. And I listened to this remarkable woman defend me even when she had every reason to expose me. Sarah, you could have destroyed me days ago. Why didn't you? Sarah's voice trembles with emotion. Because somewhere underneath all that power and money, I saw the man who once helped my nephew get into college. The man who quietly paid for our neighbor's cancer treatment. I saw someone worth saving, even from himself. Charles nods slowly, tears forming in his eyes for the first time in decades. Marcy, he says, turning to his daughter, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the man I became, for choosing business over family, for choosing wealth over relationships. Marcy rushes to his side, embracing him carefully. Dad, I thought I'd lost you forever. When I walked away from the company, from our family, I thought you'd never forgive me. I was proud of you for walking away, Charles admits. I was too stubborn to say it then, but I was proud that you had the courage to stand up for what was right, something I forgot how to do. Dr. Walters clears her throat, still processing the revelation. Charles, do you understand the legal implications of what you've done? The medical fraud alone. I understand completely, Charles replies firmly, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. But first, I have some things to make right. Over the next hour, as Charles's strength returns, he begins the process of undoing the damage he's caused. He confesses to the authorities about his faked coma, accepting full responsibility. He revises his will again, this time establishing a foundation for small business owners who've been hurt by corporate greed, with Sarah and Marcy as co-directors. Most importantly, he publicly apologizes to the dozens of families his business practices have harmed over the years. beginning a process of making amends that will take years to complete. As the sun sets over the Barrington estate weeks later, Sarah stands in the garden where she once worked as a maid, now overseeing the transformation of the mansion into a community center. Charles, recovered but humbled, works alongside her, his expensive suits replaced with work clothes as he tends to the vegetables. They're growing for the local food bank. "You saved my life, Sarah," Charles says, wiping sweat from his brow. "Not from the fake coma, from the real coma I was living in. The one where I'd forgotten what it means to be human." Sarah smiles, watching Marcy teach a group of local children about organic gardening. "We all save each other, Charles. That's what community means." The Barrington name, once synonymous with ruthless ambition, now represents something entirely different: redemption, community service, and the power of truth to transform even the hardest hearts. Sometimes the most powerful awakening isn't from a medical coma, but from the moral sleep we fall into when we lose sight of what truly matters. And sometimes it takes someone with the courage to speak truth to power, like a maid who refused to stay silent, to wake us up before it's too late. What would you do if you discovered a powerful person's secret? Would you have the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult? Share your thoughts in the comments below.